Hey, what's up, YouTube? It is Kyle with HospitalityMD, and you are tuning in to another episode of the HospitalityMD podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in here on YouTube. If you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Now, for those of you who missed it, we made some pretty big announcements last week. One of which is that we are now a business. So Hospitality MD is offering a suite of services, including hotel management and receivership, hotel task force, along with hospitality consulting. So if you require any of those services, you know who to turn to. Now, we also are extremely excited to have released our full-length trailer for our debut documentary entitled Point of Impact, which is about the #1 DoubleTree by Hilton hotel in the world, and about our previous podcast guest, Craig Poole, who runs the hotel. So if you have not seen that, be sure to check the link in the description to our website, and you can find out a little bit more about us, along with the link to the YouTube video for the trailer. And without further ado, I present to you part one of our two-part series with Josh Schreib. He is a task force general manager with Hotel Equities, and today's episode is covering everything from his experience starting from doorman to general manager. We'll be covering some crazy stories about suicide in a guest room, among other things. And we'll also be talking about how to cope with the trauma that can occur by working in the hotel industry and dealing with things that you were never trained to deal with, such as a suicide or fights breaking out or whatever the case might be. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. So, Josh, you're a Chicago native, just like myself, having worked in, I think you started the Hard Rock, right back when it was the Hard Rock downtown?
Yes, my favorite building in Chicago, the Carbide and Carbon building, gorgeous, great experience. I got to meet so many celebrities. It was like I got to meet Shaka Khan, who my mom listened to growing up. Like I call it cleaning house music. Whenever I hear like that type of music, it reminds me of cleaning house as kids. And she was all tits and hair, and it just walked through the doors. Great to meet her, and super friendly and almost shy, which surprised me. And she was the one I think I was most excited about, just because of the childhood connection. But I think we've all been, lucky to meet different celebrities in our careers. And she's not even the biggest one I met, but she was the one that I was most excited about meeting.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's the one great thing that I think we can all relate to in this industry is whether it's a celebrity or just a family who's coming in from a place and they've never stayed at your hotel and it's the fanciest place they've ever stayed. We all get to meet a lot of interesting people that way. So I want to definitely get into your experience a little bit more. So, starting with that hotel, tell me a little bit about your career progression and kind of how we got to where you are now as you're coming at me from a guest room in Colorado Springs.
Well, I actually started off as a houseman in a casino hotel, and I did it just to pay for college. I paid for my degree, which is not in hospitality. And I worked, I think I did that for 3 months, but I was on the VIP floors there where all the whales were. And those were the best housekeepers. And like it was kind of like revered to be on those top floors. And like Miss Millie and Miss Yvonne and Maria, they were like our three like main suite housekeepers. And they had a say over who was their house person on the floors, which I think is amazing. That's how much respect they earned in the hotel. And I would often work on different floors. And one day I got assigned up there and they said, Miss Millie and Yvonne are testing you out. So, be careful. So I was. And I guess they used to set up the housemen and put like $20 tips in the rooms and see if they'd take them. And I didn't take it. So I passed their test. So then they started requesting me to be up there. And I was a very hard worker. I got that work ethic from my parents, and I'm very grateful for that. And it served me well. And I would strip their rooms from them, and then I started helping them clean. And they would teach me different tricks in cleaning that to this day I still teach housekeepers. They were really amazing housekeepers. And I learned a lot, and that kind of created my interest in the industry a little bit, was, the setting the stage portion of it, which is exactly what they did. And there were things that you would never notice. And there's even like a science to that, where your eye comes in and immediately goes to a shiny object. And if there's a thumbprint on that shiny object, immediately you start to notice flaws. Whereas if it's completely sleek and smooth, it just captivates you, and it takes your eye to a different place. Your eye moves in a different way. And they taught me that in a in a less theatrical fashion. But they said that, like, basically, like, hey, if you leave this on here, they're going to look at this and they're going to start noticing this, and it was true. And I'm very grateful to those ladies for that. But then I got promoted to a housekeeping clerk, which was basically like a dispatch, because it was a fairly big hotel. So we took all the requests, we did inventories, that kind of thing. And then moved into bellman, which I did for years. And those spots were hard to get into. And I think one of the bellmen had just been late one too many times from one too many hard nights partying. And I was lucky enough to be able to interview for the job and took it. And that's when I really fell in love with it. And I had graduated college, and I really didn't enjoy what I was doing. I had done like a short internship, and it was not for me at all. And at the end of it, the studio asked if I wanted to stay on, and I said no because it was miserable. And it was nothing they did everything right. It was nothing against them. It was just it was not the right fit for me. And I was lost for a few years, and I was just working as a bellman, and I just fell in love with it at one point, because I was like, you know what, I really like this. Why don't I just try this? And if I don't enjoy it, I can always go down another path and try that. But I have to make some kind of action, because I was kind of in a sense of where I had no direction, and that was frustrating to me, because I wanted to progress in some way. So I decided I was going to make that my career, and just own it and take it. And in that time, once I made it my decision to do, I went back to school and got just an associate's degree in hospitality, just to show I was serious about it. And in that time, it was from when I decided, in 4 years, I became a GM.
Do you remember what your enunciation moment was, so to speak, from when you were a bellman? Was there a specific interaction or an instance that, just engaged you to the point where you decided that this was what you wanted to do?
There were a lot of them. I think it was a cumulative of all the experiences, because it wasn't just about bringing up someone's bags. And that's what I would try to explain to people. That's just the job. The mission, or your purpose. Mission, I think, is more of a corporate word. Your purpose is to impact someone and to really give them something to remember. And I was a hustler. I know I made really good money doing bellman, but it was because I would do so much more. And I remember my boss saying to me, because I would act like it was all about the money. And if I told 22-year-old me that you do this for the people, I would have never believed the future self. But it's exactly why I did it. And one of my boss said to me, he's like, you act like you're all about the money, but you do this for more than that. And I didn't say anything, but that still sticks with me. And it meant a lot to me, because it was obvious that I did it for more than the money. And initially that was the drive. But, now that I think about it, there is a time that it kind of clicked for me when it was like midnight. It was a hustle bustle day, and I had these people pull up, and they had their stuff in a hefty garbage bag. And I was thinking, I'm ready to go home, and they really want me to carry this hefty garbage bag upstairs. But I thought, you know what? I had a really good day. I made some good money. Let's just have a good attitude about it. Coaching myself. And I took them upstairs, and I was telling them all about the area, and they were like, wow, we didn't know there was that much to do around here. And anywhere I go, I always try to find out the fun little unique characteristics of an area. As small as a town it could be, there's always something unique about it. And they said, this is really fun. You gave us a lot to look forward to. And they gave me $20, which coming out of a hefty bag, it's not what you'd expect. And it kind of hit me that, what, if I just give this and put this out in the world, and if it comes back to me, great. If not, I did something for someone else. And that's when it really kind of hit me that it was more than the money. The money still came, but my focus became more on serving the guest versus serving myself.
That's beautiful, man. I got goosebumps as you were speaking about that, because I think maybe initially, I think it was safe to say you may have judged a book by its cover to a certain extent when the guest walked in, which we've all done it before, right? And
absolutely.
And maybe they had also at the same time judged you and said, this bellman is going to take our bags up to our room. It's going to be a transactional interaction. And you took that interaction from transactional to transformational, and they paid it back for you as well. So that's a great story about unconditional hospitality. And it's clear just in the way that you speak that enunciation moment continues to drive you in your career. So from that point,
and I'll say too, because I know this is a struggle for a lot of leaders and we're not necessarily honest about it, is that there's times you have to remind yourself of that and to say that this person deserves this experience, as difficult as they are, as frustrating as they've been. This is more, these people need it more than anyone else I've served today. And even though it may be hard, and even though you may want to be righteous or, pay just desserts, you have to remind yourself in that moment, like, no, this person really needs this more, and this is for me too, to remind myself that it's my job to do more to put that good out in the world. Whatever I'm a firm believer in everything we put out is who we are. It speaks of who we are. So if you put out crap work, or if you put out, and we're all guilty of it. We make those lapses where we fall back into bad habits or are just tired, and we need to remind ourselves and re-energize ourselves to keep delivering that kind of service.
You just keep laying the goosebumps on me today, Josh. I don't know what it is, but it's that sentiment is so relevant right now. There's one thing that we're trying to talk about more at Hospitality MD, and is becoming a larger part of the conversation, is especially right now during this pandemic, there's more social issues going on in the hotel industry, aside from the financial distress that everybody's going through. And what you touched on is certainly one of them, as a result of schisms between ownership, management company, executive management, on property management, line level associates, and guests. There's all these schisms going on in the way that we navigate this crisis. And one of the results of that is, I think people, maybe being more apathetic towards the guest. Rates are lower. People who aren't as well traveled are coming and staying in hotels more so than ever. And, we find ourselves in a point where people are judging the guests and vice versa. But to be able to remind ourselves of why we started doing this, especially right now as we navigate, as people are so burnt out and trying to do far more with much less. I think a lot of people can maybe resonate with that sentiment, certainly right now.
Yeah, we all need that too. Like, hearing other speakers, like I love Christine Chase Trippy. When I have a bad day, or I try to think like, what would she do? Because I think she really lives that and has that spirit. And but my part, and while it's effortless for her, I think some of us do have to really sometimes put ourselves in check and say, this is what I'm doing this. This is why I do this, and re-energize ourselves. And I think things like this podcast, or even reading about other hospitality stories, do like give you those goosebump moments to reiterate, this is why I'm doing this. This is my purpose here. And if you're not feeling that, and you're not getting that response, this may not be the right thing for you to do. And that's okay, but find that thing and give it full force. If not everything has to be your passion, but it has to give you enough energy and excitement to want to continue doing it.
Yeah, because when you, especially in hotels, when you don't even have the luxury of sometimes being able to tell your spouse or your family or your friends, hey, I'm going to be off of work at this certain time and we can do this. If you don't even have the luxury of being able to do that, you're going to need to have some energy just to be able to continue to function and not let yourself go into a dark place. Now I do want to talk, certainly, as it connects to our mutual city here of Chicago, as your experience at the 664 room triplex. It was Loft, Fairfield, and Hyatt Place
Yeah.
in the north, right? So
Yeah.
big hotel, very unique concept, and you were working overnight MOD. Man, just tell me about it. I'm sure a lot of people would love to know how that was for you.
I know that it sounds insane, but I wanted that job so bad. As soon as I read the job description, I knew, because I kind of thrive on chaos, and I knew it was going to be chaotic, and I knew there was going to be so much to it because it's 3 different brands. So I had to know 3 different brand standards, 3 different PMS systems. I had a great staff that I could really trust to handle the situations that arose. And often some of the brands performed better than the others. I'm not going to state any names here, but we would have hotels that needed to sell out first because of the redemptions for rewards. And at that time, that hotel had the lowest redemption rate in the city. So we would max with that. And then we would we had to hit that 95% threshold, to get the rewards. So sometimes we would have to relocate. We would oversell the other hotels to relocate to that hotel. And we would have to do it in a way where it didn't just dissolve the guest experience. So my night outers got to the point where they saw me do it enough where they were able to do it, and it seemed like we were doing them a favor. I had one of my front desk agents. She was great, and a front desk supervisor, I should say. And the woman came back and gave her a bottle of wine and a hug for walking her to the other hotel. But we didn't call it that. We didn't treat it like that. We said, "Oh, we have this, new brand and experience. We want to give you the opportunity to experience and see what it's like." And we take them over there and let them choose something from the snack bar, and we elevated it. Like one of the agents would help carry their luggage over there, almost like a bellman. If the bellman, because obviously we didn't always have bellman on that shift, but it was always that kind of experience where then they felt like they were really getting some kind of privilege when in actuality we were relocating them. But it's all about that delivery. But those were the times where it was more like just trying to maximize revenues and sellouts. Because it really, it would be thousands of dollars that would be lost if I didn't sell the hotel out. But on top of that, you're in River North, where one of our selling points was there's 150 bars and restaurants in a 5-block radius. So you had people all over. And I actually had a couple homeless folks that hung around every night, and I got to know them pretty well. And I would feed them. I'd say, hey, I'll get you a sandwich, and I'd get them something from the market or a little restaurant in there, and they would keep lookout for me and let me know things that were going on in the hotel and come get me. And the one guy, I don't know his real name, but his name was Pork Chop, and Pork Chop was like my guy, and he would keep an eye out for me and let me know, like, hey, there's people peeing on the side of the building or whatever. And I mean, building those kind of relationships, because I didn't have a big security crew. It was me and one guy for 664 rooms, and a lot can happen. I had a Halloween where I had a woman who I think had been assaulted and came out of the hotel and fell out on the sidewalk with her panties around her ankles, and people were starting to take pictures of her. So like covering her, trying to cover her up and stay with her for the ambulance. But then at the same time, a fight broke out at the other corner of the hotel. So I had to go break that up because it was right in front of our entrance and there were guests trying to get in. And then on the other end of the building, I had a night auditor who needed to do a walk, which obviously that was lower priority at the time. But those things all would happen at the same time, and I would have to balance them and keep a semblance of order, because if my team saw me shake or quake, then they wouldn't feel confident. And that was one thing I was really proud of on that job, was all the mess we dealt with, the fights, the people, prostitutes as you get, in the night, who, stealing money from the Johns. I mean, that happens at the nicest of hotels. It has nothing to do with the quality. People, being relocated, people who are upset with their stay, people who didn't get room service, whatever the item is, being able to keep that order is so important, and we dealt with a lot of stuff, and it's something we don't often, get the opportunity to address, is how do you keep your cool, and it's not easy, but for me, I'm a fairly resilient person, and I feel like I get this like kind of moment where everything becomes calm, and I have this clear sense of what needs to happen. So I try to keep that control in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to do a goosebump tracker or something for this episode, because you got me again, man. And there's something that, like, I think only true like hospitalitarians who just love the game. And just even when you said that you saw the job description, you're like, I want this job, this is for me. And you get there and it's probably even more chaotic than you could have imagined. I mean, I've, after my hotel shifts have gone in the, previously, and gone out drinking and whatever in River North. And when you walk out of a bar at 3 a.m. and just survey the scene, around Hubbard Street and all that kind of stuff, and it's, homeless people and crackheads over here, fights over here, people crying over here. Like, it's just absolutely insane at times to be able to kind of manage the chaos of a hotel, which is oftentimes the anchor points of these major street corners and of the community, with multiple different, you have the people who are there to party, the families who didn't know that it was going to be this crazy in the location that they were staying in, and just wanted to grab dinner somewhere. To be able to handle all that is you got to be true to the game to do that. Another thing too that I thought was awesome is you did something that I think a lot of hoteliers, especially given that location, probably wouldn't do, or maybe would even criticize you for, which is building and maintaining relationships with the homeless population in the area. I myself have often been known, and my coworkers have laughed at me for that. And sometimes, it would get out of hand where I'm in the lobby and there's a homeless guy knocking on the glass trying to get me to come outside, and I'm like, I'm busy, can't you see what I'm doing here? But ultimately, I think it's good to maintain those relationships, and they were able to look out for you, and you had a nice symbiotic reciprocal
well, I'm good with boundaries, and I was, they could tell, like, and I'm a big guy, so I don't really have a lot of people mess with me. So I think I had that kind of imposing nature, just physically, for them not to really kind of overstep those boundaries. Like, I would kind of, look at them and let them, like, they could just tell, like, I'm not available right now. And then when I did see them and I was available, I was very warm. So I think it was just a sense of, like, creating those boundaries to know, like, hey, you can't come in the hotel, you can't come in the lobby, but I'll come around and see you. I'll make sure you're taken care of, but just know those lines. And I'm not saying every homeless person in the city I was friends with,
Right.
but there were a couple that, like, Pork Chop was one of them, and I had another one. I called her. Again, I didn't know her name, but I called her Puddin, and there's a whole story about that. But I'd be afraid of my bosses knowing that one. But Puddin was another one who'd look out, and she kind of let me know things too. But she was more sporadic. Pork Chop was my constant.
Yeah, definitely. So you did touch as well on kind of in the midst of all this craziness, right? That maybe you or I would thrive on. It's tough too. It's tough when you're in those situations and you're working overnights or whatever the case might be, and you as a night auditor, front desk agent, you take a job and you're like, I'm going to check people in and I'm going to work overnight and I can keep to myself. And then it's like, oh, that's definitely not what this is all about, once you're in the midst of it. And there's times that things happen that challenge your mental fortitude a little bit. Have you experienced anything traumatic with your team that you've had to overcome with them?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's part of the business, is that sometimes we deal with things that we're not prepared for. And to do so as a leader, I think it's important for us to do so with some reverence and respect to the situation. So that way we're setting up an example to the team, because sometimes they don't know how to deal with it. And even sometimes leaders don't know how to deal with it. Things will come to you, and you just and you have to find that moment in that chaos to ground you. Like, I remember this one time there was this huge fight in the pool. This wasn't in the city, but the pool area. These two families were fighting, and they were both having parties, and neither one of them should have a party. And everybody's yelling at each other. And I'm looking around the room, and I see this one person who's just calm, and I'm like, that's my person. So I go right to them and I say, hey, can you help me? Just talk to your family. I'm going to try to do what I can to fix this. And just finding that sense, that grounding, because that everything else will just kind of fall into place and it will catch on it. One thing that was really, I think, probably one of the more, and I think a lot of hoteliers have experienced this too, it's more traumatizing for most people. We had a room where someone committed suicide, and we didn't know initially, but someone kept calling for them, and they weren't answering the phone. And the guy on the other end, I think, knew something wasn't right, because he almost had, his voice was cracking. He's like, please, can you just go check on him? And of course, we do wellness checks. And when we tried to open the door, it was locked. And when so I had engineering come, to open the door, because we weren't getting a response. And when we opened, the man was hanging. He actually hung himself from the door. And in that moment, I just pulled together and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Everyone's standing up here. This doesn't leave this area. We need to respect this man and his life. And I remember his name. I won't say it for respect, but I remember his name to this day. And in that moment, I knew it was my responsibility to make sure that we gave him that respect and honor of his life, to not make a joke of it, to not make it a gossip for the hotel. So I made sure everyone knew that. I said, this is what we're going to do. You're going to call the police. I'm going to stay here, and they were shaking. And I did everything. I said, it's not our fault. There's nothing we could have done. But now it's our duty to make things as smooth as possible and with the most respectful way as possible. And we did that. And when I went home, I could understand like why people who are in like medical or law enforcement do what they do, because it's almost like a euphoric experience. And I hate to make it sound like it's something to look forward to, because it's not. It made me evaluate, how grateful I am for my life, and that I'm in a place where I wouldn't even consider that. But it also was something that I thought was beautiful, because it gave me that opportunity to deliver that experience for him and his family, and to talk to the man on the other line and calm him, and not, I couldn't say anything. I had to let the police, talk to him. But I wanted to give him some kind of warmth in that moment. And it's not that I'm grateful it happened. Do not misunderstand that. But I'm grateful that I was the one who was able to handle it and be there, because I knew I handled it the best I could, and I gave everything to make it so that it wasn't cold, or it wasn't transactional, or it wasn't, disrespectful. And that meant a lot to me, that I was the person who took the call, if that makes sense.
It does. It does a lot. Having experienced a similar situation, I've had one where a guest shot himself in the head, and that was one thing. But I think more rewarding, I had a guest who, very similar to how your story started. A family member was calling and calling and calling, and we couldn't get a hold of the guest. And when we went up to do a wellness check, the guest had swallowed just an enormous amount of pills and had drank a whole bunch of alcohol and was laying on the floor crying and throwing up, and just in a really bad place. And I think we got there at the right time, and were able to take the right necessary precautions, talk him off the ledge, and get him the medical attention he needed. And then the following day, his father showed up at the hotel and gave me a hug and thanked me for helping to save his son's life and being there at the right time. And I think, for me, and I'm sure you could agree with this as well, for somebody to make the decision that I want to go to a hotel room where nobody knows who I am, and, where I can be off the grid and alone, and make that highly personal, intimate decision to take your life or attempt to take your own life. As hoteliers, we're a backdrop to that experience for that person. And even though it's tough and we don't want to see that, that doesn't change the fact that we're not there. We do serve a kind of a bigger overarching responsibility in those unique moments. Do you have any comments on that sentiment?
Yeah, that's something that's very important to me. And it's the underbelly of our industry is the emotional and mental toll that it can take on us. And we don't teach how to cope with that. And it's, we're not mental health professionals, so it's not our responsibility, so say, to do so, but we prepare our staff, to physically for the job, to maintain safety, proper lifting techniques, bloodborne pathogens, lockout, tag out, those sort of things. But we don't prepare for the mental part, which is a very real part of our industry and creates burnout for a lot of people. And there's a way that we could do it to teach, like, hey, this is our purpose. Like, that it's for me, that is what the driving philosophy is, that makes it palatable for me, is that I understand there's something bigger there, and I have that responsibility, and I feel that sense of commitment to it, to deliver it. But not everyone has that. So you have to find what motivates and drives that person. And it's a very subjective way of coping. Like, there's not one answer for everyone, which makes it harder to teach, because if everyone lifts with their knees, the bed's easy to, you're not going to hurt your back, kind of thing. But there's not one size fits all fix for that. But it's something that does need to be discussed. And I want to bring it to the forefront, because there's a way we can do it without either villainizing the industry or the guests, because I think it's part of a bigger problem that we don't talk about how to deal with emotions, or when you're angry, how to properly communicate them. No one teaches you that. You learn it throughout your life, but by the time you've mastered it, the game's almost over. And it's something I think if we talk and adopt early and make it part of the job and say, hey, this can be a stressful job and this can be this, but this is what you can do. This is things I found work for me. It may not work for you, but I think just sharing those experiences and talking about it creates that conversation and makes people okay with talking about it, and not just saying, well, that's the job, or that's just what we have to do. The coping part is the part that we need to work on. Yeah, we can say, anything like, yeah, that's just how it is. That's always a frustrating phrase, and something I agree with Kayla on, is that hearing that, well, that's just the industry. It doesn't have to be. We're leaders in the industry and we create that. So if we talk about it in our stand-ups and saying, hey, we had this difficult guest, but you know, we're dealing with our emotions. And in that moment, you don't want to think about how other people are feeling, because you know what you're feeling. And if you're frustrated or angry, that should be at the forefront. But if you reflect once it's done and think about, well, that person was really upset. Well, maybe they don't know how to manage their emotions, or maybe that, and that's why, their first instinct is to get angry and yell, because maybe they grew up in an environment where that's the case. And if we can counter that with a positive way of handling it, like calming them and saying, hey, you know what? I understand you're upset. Let me help you, because you don't want to reward bad behavior, but you want to quell it, and just kind of get them to be like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to fix it. And delivering that with confidence is a big key, because if they don't think that you have it under control, they're not going to, their behaviors won't change. So you have to be able to influence their behaviors through your behavior. And it's something that it's not easy and it doesn't come to everyone, but it's something I like to talk about because it's important. And I think we don't discuss it enough. And I think especially with our line level employees, and those things that we can teach the industry, whether they stay with us or not, because we know it's a very transient industry, that's something that will serve them lifelong.
And to amplify your point a little bit, I think part of it is acknowledging, like, hey, like, are you okay after that guest just screamed at you? Or are you okay after you just witnessed this traumatic event, or whatever it is? Because a lot of people, just because you're at work, it's a professional setting, people can be apprehensive to express how they're truly feeling. They can repress it, and and then it would just kind of come back bottled up later on in a more explosive way, after being triggered by another situation. I can recall my most recent hotel with, when civil unrest broke out following the death of George Floyd. Being in downtown Chicago, my hotel was at the epicenter of the kind of violence that unfolded. And, with a hotel full of guests and staff, the hotel was intruded by rioters, and all of our windows got broken. And it was very scary for a lot of people. And, the management company was kind of just like back to work next day. That houseman that was huddled in the back office with a frying pan thinking that somebody might try and break through the door had to go and strip rooms the next day. And we never really sat down and was like, hey, is everybody okay? Even for the people who weren't at work that day, I remember people called me and said, oh, I was crying when I saw it on the news, or I almost fainted when I was watching this, because I wanted to make sure everybody was okay. There's trauma that can be involved in working in a hotel, whether it's small, like, a guest calling you something very offensive and you taking it to heart, or witnessing a suicide, or your hotel being destroyed by a civil unrest. There's so much that goes on, and we just don't acknowledge it oftentimes. And I think that's something, when we're handling a guest, most of the time we try and, the heart method or the learn method, we try and deploy that and try and empathize and hear them out and, understand where their feelings are coming from. Yet we fail to do that when it comes to our own family at the hotel. So I think it's great that, at least you and there's other people coming up who are starting to make it a conversation, but we still have a long way to go as an industry, without a doubt, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I task the brands to take that into consideration and make that part of the training. It's not just, grassroots is most important. We have to deliver the message, but if it starts up, everything you do, as you know, in a hotel trickles down from leadership, and I have to remind myself of that. But I also, I put the brands to task for that, because we do deal with this, and we all have stories like this. We all have our war wounds and share them, when we get with other hoteliers. And it needs to happen. But I think having the conversation starts the process and gets the ball rolling. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to address that, because it is something that it means a lot to me. And I value the experiences I've had in the industry. I think they've made me a better person, even having gone through it. Like, but I like I said, some people it comes naturally to. I think I handle trauma and those kind of things well. Not everyone does. I can't say how it happens or how I can hold it together, but I do. But it is something that needs to be discussed. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I would relate to you in the sense that I feel like I do a great job. I thrive on chaos and uncertainty, and I love that part of the hotel game, and I love the day to day of it all. And um, I feel like I handled these situations very well myself, and it wasn't until um, shortly after that experience I mentioned at my previous hotel with the riots that occurred in Chicago, that I was laying in bed. I was living at the hotel at the time, and I was laying in bed just hanging out, and I started to feel so like tense pain in my chest, and I thought to myself, holy shit, I'm having a heart attack right now. So I was like, and I have congenital heart disease. So I was like, oh shit, like I'm definitely having a heart attack. So I got my shoes on and I took myself to Northwestern, and they couldn't find anything wrong. They said everything looks great. And it wasn't until, I spoke with a mental health professional that I discovered that I had actually had a panic attack. And I said I didn't feel like anxious, my heart wasn't racing, those symptoms that you typically associate with panic attacks. I wasn't having any of those things. I was clear headed the entire time. And what she said was, because I don't, you know, mentally feel anxious when I experience trauma, that my body was manifesting that in physical symptoms. And that was a huge wake up call for me, that like, even as tough as you might be, or as good at handling something as you think you are, your your mind and your body still have, there's still like those animal instincts or whatever, that primal stuff, that you still will experience trauma and it will manifest itself in one way or another. um, Another thing that I think is worth sharing, that this mental health professional told me, is when you experience something, and I'll use the riots as an example, if you felt like you were at any point afraid of being physically harmed, your brain doesn't know the difference and it takes it as if you were actually physically harmed. So mentally, you may as well have been, attacked in some way, shape, or form personally and experienced physical damage, and your brain takes it the same way. So I definitely think, whether you know that you don't handle things, maybe, I don't know if well would be the right word, but if you don't handle things very well in the moment, or maybe you think you do, I think everybody can experience the same types of symptoms and adverse mental health effects
Yeah.
in the long term.
Yes, and it's also important that we have an outlet for it and to address it, because it does build up on you. It's something that, even though, like you said, in the moment you handle it, it later can impact you. So making sure that you have those moments where you either have someone that you can talk to, or you have a healthy outlet, which I do. I'm very fortunate for that, to deal with that, because otherwise it can build on you and it can cause a lot of issues. And like you said, it can manifest physically in you. Um, it's it, that's again another reason why it needs to be at the forefront, because it can impact our health. And again, I don't want to do it in a way that it's not like we're villainizing the industry, but it's just a reality of the world we live in. I want I love that you went to see someone about it, because I think, and even just discussing that, I applaud you for that, because a lot of people are ashamed of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to the doctor, it's health. I'm an ambivert. Like, I love talking to people and being with them, but then I have to have my time to myself. And if I don't allow myself And I know that myself enough to know that I have to give myself those times where I don't talk to anybody. I'm just holed up in my room with a book and to decompress, because I don't deliver or perform at the same level if I don't have that. So and you learn those things, and by talking about your mental health, whether that be with a professional, which I recommend, and I'm lucky to have a sibling that is in the industry. So that helps, to be able to speak to someone who has that knowledge, and knows you well enough. And everyone has that privilege.
Thank you so much for watching part 1 of 2 of our interview series with Josh Schreib, Task Force General Manager with Hotel Equities. If you enjoyed it, be sure to stay tuned, because we will be releasing part 2 of his interview very soon. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share if you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time with another episode of Hospitality MD.